Do we know what the camera is like?
So are you based at any particular campus? Or
We know the campus. Anything.
All right, lovely.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Mm.
Yep.
Oh, great.
And then coming in more.
Cool.
Okay.
Good.
Of course. Yeah, well, that's good. I'm at Fairwood, but I'm at home a lot.
All right, we're starting off, everyone. Hi. Hi, welcome, everyone. I'm Emma Koval from the Science and Society Network.
I'm Toya Chinque. I'm also in Science and Society Network. I'm a co-lead of the data cultures stream. Some of you before, but looking forward to hearing more about projects.
Yes, and I'm co-convener of the network currently with Blank. Yep. And first I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and acknowledge their stewardship and ownership of the land and their elders past, present and emerging. And I would like to welcome everyone here today. Thank you for coming along, and to those watching this online. So the goal today is to talk about interdisciplinarity and how we do it. And this is also offered as part of the Research Development Academy, the RDA, and did I get that right? Yes, I did. And to people within the Science and Society Network and who are Science and Society Network curious. So the structure today will be that the first part will be a presentation from myself and Toya about interdisciplinarity. You know, what are the ups and downs of it, and whether it's right for you. And then in the second part, we will go to a workshop style, and we'll stop the recording and stop the streaming and talk about your ideas and your projects. Excellent. So, any queries before we get started? Just a reminder that there's some fresh fruit if anyone wants to jump up and help themselves. Yes, people in person get fruit and also lunch afterwards. So there's a lot of benefits to coming in. Okay. So firstly, just what is the Science and Society Network? We support science literate social research and socially engaged science that makes an impact. So we've been around. The nub of it started in 2017, and then we've been offering funding support since 2019 for interdisciplinary grants, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the most important part of the Science and Society Network is to create a research environment at Deakin where people are encouraged to work across disciplines, and where we have support and really attention to how you do that. What are the tools for making that happen? We are, and I do encourage you to have a look at our annual reports on the website if you do want to learn more about what we've been getting up to. We have 4 streams in the way we're currently organised. Indigenous knowledges, and we have Professor Tiffany Shellam here, who's one of the conveners of that stream. We have Healthy Futures, and I'm currently co-leading that stream. Environmental Challenges and Data Cultures, of which Toya mentioned is the current co-leader. We also have Radhika Gura here, who is our deputy convener. And here's a picture of most of the current team. And we've all kind of become part of SSN through a fairly organic process of just people who have either received funding in the past or who are doing interdisciplinary research. And so we've kind of come together, and quite a few others have been involved in leadership over the last 7 or 8 years. Because we all really care about working across disciplines. So, what is interdisciplinary research to start with? The Australian Research Council, the ARC, which funds a lot of research, they're very keen on interdisciplinary research, and they had a paper about that just a couple of years ago. So very broadly, we can think of it as research approaches that don't fit in a traditional single disciplinary structure. It can be researchers from different disciplines working together in a team that bring different perspectives to solve a problem. It doesn't have to be researchers from different disciplinary backgrounds. It can just be one researcher, but who is using methods, concepts, theories, data, or outcomes from one discipline to solve a problem in another discipline. Another way to think about interdisciplinary research and how the ARC, the Australian Research Council, thinks about it is research that can be assigned to two or more different field of research codes. So that's kind of a very mechanical way of thinking about it, but also very important. So, for example, 2-digit codes are the first 2 codes in the fields of research, which you can Google that if you're not familiar with that, but that's how we classify research in Australia and New Zealand. So 42, for example, is health. 46 is information and computing sciences. So if research can be categorized by a code that's within health and within information and computing sciences, then that counts from the ARC perspective as interdisciplinary research. But as you can see from the different ways I've described it, it can be many, many different things. And the ways that I find easy to categorize it are to think about how close the different disciplines are, whether we're talking about, again, actual people who have training in 2 different disciplines or just one person that's using methods and approaches and engaging with literature from different disciplines. So you've got collaboration with cognate fields, with what we could think of as near neighbours, and I've got a few examples there. And usually these kind of collaborations will be within the sciences or within engineering or within humanities and social sciences. So they will be not kind of moving across these wider divides, but still interdisciplinary research, and can still be, very, very different approaches and different literatures and different methods. But what we're more interested in supporting in the Science and Society Network, because it is, I think, in general, it's going to be even more challenging, is to collaborate across what we might call the HASS-STEM divide. So STEM being sciences, technology, engineering and maths, or people define it a different way, but that's one. And HASS being humanities and social sciences. So a few examples of reaching across that divide or more distant interdisciplinary collaboration would be material science and political science, criminology, law and systems engineering, health science and creative arts. So they're just a few of the kinds of projects that we've supported through the Science and Society Network. And as I've said, you can also individually do interdisciplinary research, whether that's cognate or distant. So just to give a few examples, we have just a few slides on some examples. So Professor Tiffany Shalom is actually here, and I don't know, do you want to tell us a bit about your project as an example?
Sure. Yeah, this is a project that began with an SSN incubator grant in 2019, working with historians, anthropology and science curators and fish scientists and traditional owners in Albany in Western Australia, Manang Noongar community, on a historical fish and cultural collection. And with the incubator grant funding, we were able to develop it into a larger linkage project, and now have again won another grant for category 2 to 4 grant with a council in Albany in Western Australia to bring this work that we've been doing across these disciplines into an exhibition. Yeah. So it's been a fantastic project to be supported by the SSN because it has been truly interdisciplinary and challenging and good in those ways as well.
Yeah, so Tiffany's project has been really, really amazing and truly interdisciplinary and also incredibly innovative. So bringing together, addressing an issue that really people are just starting to look at internationally of what do we do regarding natural history collections, biological collections, and the Indigenous knowledge that can be contained with them, and that should be how the communities can collaborate with museums to really bring proper governance to those collections. Another example here is the Resilient Australia National Local Government Award, the adaptation game, with Martin Potter and Ben Pedricks, and they built a game that is helping local councils around Australia and internationally to simulate, to model different climate scenarios and help with their planning for climate adaptation. And that, again, was a collaboration with climate scientists and with people in the creative arts that's had many different lives, that project. Couple of other examples. So Tim Silk, who's in the School of Psychology, has got SSNC funding for a project collaborating with philosophers to think about Tourette syndrome from a phenomenological perspective, and that's gone on to be really successful with many grants. I won't go through all of them, but just a couple more, and we're just kind of looking at projects that are based in different faculties at Deakin, but they all reach across disciplines. So coming from the science faculty, Rangam Rajkova has started a really amazing project looking at textile waste and recycling pigments, and collaborating with Indigenous artists initially to look at how those could be used. And the Human-Centric Technologies Group, which is now developed by a couple of colleagues in the School of IT, started as a few different SSN projects looking at how VR can be used in heritage for post-industrial cities, and also VR in space for providing experiences for astronauts. So there's some of the really exciting projects that we've supported through the SSN. And hopefully we can hear about some of your ideas for projects in the second part of today. So I'll just talk a little bit more about why do interdisciplinary research. There's a lot of reasons to do it, but there are some dangers that you can face along the way. So first of all, we want to do better research, always want to do things better and better. If you can answer your research questions better by drawing on more than one discipline, then we should do that. Or you might do better research because you're expanding the horizon of your research questions. So you might want to think about how it applies in different contexts. You might want to think about the ethics of your certain aspect of your research, or you might want to think about how it translates into policy. So by bringing in different disciplines, you might be able to just expand the horizons of what you're trying to do. People can do it to increase their success with getting grant funding or getting publications. But as I'll talk about in a bit, that you do need to be careful with that. It can not work as a strategy. it can really help you position yourself in the field, and we all know that academia is incredibly competitive, and it is a real race often to to get the jobs, to get the grants, get the fellowships. So figuring out what is special about you and also what you're known for, that drawing on different disciplines can really help to figure out, what is the value that I add to an institution or to a research program. It can really help you gain higher visibility, and particularly if you're working across distant fields, so that so if you're publishing in journals that are in a very different area, then that's a whole new community. If you're going to conferences in a different area, you get more people to get to know you, and it hopefully can increase your chances of employment, again because of that, able to position yourself as something special. But again, it can backfire. But most of all, we should do interdisciplinary research because it's enjoyable, because it's fun, and we're not in this to enjoy ourselves. Then we can find other things that are less trouble than academia. So why not do it? There are plenty of reasons not to do it, and it's good. We shouldn't just be doing it because everyone else thinks it's a good idea. It does take time. So people talk about the productivity penalty, where if you are getting to know colleagues in a new area, you're going to conferences where you're maybe not presenting, but you're just going there to listen, and it might be hard to get funding for those. And there's just the limited amount of time. So if you're choosing to really try and collaborate with colleagues in a different field, it will slow you down, and it can be risky professionally, and I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end as well. But in getting publications, grants and jobs, which I suppose are the three things that we all want, particularly as early and mid-career researchers, you need to make sure that you are still recognisable as your own discipline. So if you get too far outside your discipline, or you kind of present it in the wrong way, it can actually disadvantage you. Although I think that is really changing over time. I think probably maybe the elders in many of our disciplines might have a more conservative idea about what a geographer looks like, what an engineer looks like, and I think those things probably are changing over time. It is difficult managing different perspectives on an issue. That's kind of where the strength comes from, but also it can be frustrating. And learning a new language, learning how to communicate in a field. Often words that are used in different disciplines mean completely different things. Also, elaborating on that point, there's different norms and expectations. So, and a really obvious one is within the humanities and social sciences, sole authorship is normal, to be producing something that you're the only author. It's your kind of individual take on something. In the sciences, that's, maybe for a commentary piece, you might sole author it, but pretty much it's going to be multi-authored, pretty much everything. And the idea of authorship is more about you've contributed to a piece of work. That's kind of maybe happens more in research applications with multiple chief investigators, but for publications, it's much more common in the humanities and social sciences to have individuals doing their own sole authored publications. So that's something that is quite different and really needs to be discussed upfront in any disciplinary collaboration. And Toya will talk a bit more about authorship in a sec. So it can end badly. People can feel like they've been exploited if the disciplinary partner had a different idea about what they would contribute. I mean, one kind of common example is social scientists can feel that some kind of biological scientists, say synthetic biology is just one example, is a talk that we had recently from Jane Calvert, who's written a wonderful book about collaboration across disciplines from her field of synthetic biology. She didn't feel exploited all the time, but sometimes she felt like people thought that she was meant to be the ethicist, to make sure that that the science didn't get in trouble with the media or in trouble with the government or something. And that is, it's just about confusion about what people's roles are. And yeah, I think sometimes scientists can feel like they haven't got what they expected to out of a collaboration, and it's been a waste of time, for example. So all of that, but that's, I suppose, any risk, any potential high rewards, you need to take risks to get there. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Toya.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you so much for that. I'm just going to pick up from the note that Emma made about high risk and high reward, and I would say this is not a call to say jump in and do some interdisciplinary work. Be strategic about what you choose to do and how you go about it. In terms of what we're saying, things can backfire and things can go badly, and you probably still want to, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? So in the workshop, we'd be happy to unpack just the importance of FOR codes and what this means, and breaking them down. There's a division and there are layers, and as much as we don't like it, we are our demographics in certain circumstances. So really thinking about strategy around it can help. So perhaps we can unpack that in the workshop. I'm going to put my research integrity advisor hat on now. And if you didn't know, I'm the Faculty of Arts and Education representative in the Research Integrity Advisors Network for the university. And I am here for any concerns that researchers have, but I also run a number of workshops that outline some of the things researchers might need to think about. And just to add the caveat, if there are any issues that come to the fore for you, you don't have to come to me. There can be reasons why you don't want to speak to someone in your faculty. You can go to any person in the university to talk about any issues that you've got. They can help you. We're purely here to act as a point of referral. We are not here to give you explicit advice, but what we can do is help to scaffold some of the work that is done. In terms of things going badly, Emma makes a good point about setting out what your boundaries are from the start. And as much as I know it is resisted often by myself as well, I love my colleagues. We work together super well. We have coffee. We don't need an authorship agreement. Well, maybe you don't now, but maybe down the track you might, and just having that sort of document can help. So on the Research Integrity website, and it can be a little bit difficult to navigate, but often now with our AI companions, you can just do a search for authorship agreement. And this is the difficult conversation, I would argue, that everyone needs to begin their research with. Who is going to do what? Now, we're working across disciplines, and different disciplines have different expectations. Some will say, I need to be the lead author on this. And they will want to build their team around that with the expectation that that's right. I'm in the School of Communications and Creative Arts. And again, we love our colleagues. You go first, please. I really don't care. A lot of disciplines will take the position that let's go alphabetical. Others, professors will say, I have mentored my team, so I will go last and I will put them first. But that's really understood completely differently in the scientists. They would see someone at the end and they go, didn't you do any work? So really thinking about what the expectations are in your interdisciplinary team is important, and that authorship agreement will help. It will just also act to demonstrate, especially in our litigious society where more and more journal articles or journals that we submit to don't give us very much standing as authors. We need to say what was the contribution you made, and then you need to be able to back that up as a percentage. So your authorship agreement will state what are you contributing, what is each member of the team contributing. There is this push against the free rider effect. You don't bring people on because they're a nice person in the team, or you need to establish really clearly, and this has come up a number of times in integrity issues for research assistants, when they're doing some work for you and when they should be credited, or when it's just doing some literature review, and that can help as well. Question, yes.
I want to say this exclusively happening at Deakin, happens everywhere, multiple departments, but
Yes.
a lot of young academics want the name
Yeah.
of an established professor on their project, on their manuscript.
Yeah.
Even though their contribution might be minimal at best.
Yeah.
But the name has weight and prestige and helps them get through.
Yes,
know.
Understood.
Yeah.
Still unethical to do that.
Yeah, but it's common. It's very common.
It's common, but it doesn't mean that we should be accepting it. And this is where we're hoping that the more information there is, the more there can be a pushback. Because and I know this is.
I mean, I would love to see this culture stop. But
it's cultural. It's about power.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is, because I still hear researchers coming to me and saying, "I've done all this work," and my professor said, "Well, I'm not putting my name to that." And it's like, well, you shouldn't if you didn't do the work. And what is the contribution? So perhaps armed with the authorship agreement, there can be the great, let's do some work together. And it's all about the conversation too. And I'm not sure if, there are, graduate researchers, someone doing graduate research. It's a difficult thing to go to the person that is steering your PhD and that this is really important, and say to them, well, I'm not going to do this but there are ways of presenting it. I have been to this particular training. It's been recommended to me that I use this. Could we have a chat about this and then get a sense? And then if that is a difficult, and if it is a sticking point for, emerging researchers, come and talk to a research integrity advisor. You'll have the information, then it'll be your call. And exactly what Emma's saying, this is a tricky thing to navigate sometimes. Things can backfire, things can be difficult, but what we don't want to have is not have the conversation and say, well, there are conservative ways, we've always done this, let's do it in the same. So we would argue that our emerging researchers shouldn't accept the status quo if we can absolutely shore them up and say that it is appropriate that every member that's listed on a publication contributes, and we understand what their contribution is going to be. Even if it's 5% or 10%, we need to have that understanding rather than just pinning a name. So that's my first difficult conversation for the morning. I'm not sure if anyone wants to push back on that.
No, I don't want to push back. I want to back it up. When we talk to people about funding, we often say, talk about money early on in the discussion, because everyone can be friends if there's no boundaries on what you're going to do, but money helps you work out, well, who's doing what and how much is that going to cost. And also it brings up issues like, well, not just what are you expecting to get out of the research, what does your organization expect to get out of the research? My organization doesn't allow me to partner unless there's an equal split between, what's being put in, those sorts of things. So same deal, but it just, it's
and
really
so too, when
important.
there is funding, and if you're across,
But people don't like talking about money, right?
No, that's exactly right. And this is where I'd say, just put your strategy hat on. This is about being forewarned, being prepared, and we do have to have those difficult conversations. And hopefully, the more that we do so, yes, there is a difficult conversation about authorship, and there is a form that you fill out, and everyone, outlines what they're going to do, what role they're going to take, where the authorship is going to sit. Same with the grants, and this can be either through a memorandum of understanding between organisations, and this can be easily set up, and it's a less formal agreement. But oftentimes when there's funding involved, there is a contract, and so with industry, for example, there'll be a contract between parties that you will need to sign, which outlines what funding is coming in, how it's going to be spent, etc. But then also what happens if someone leaves the institution, what happens to that funding. I was on a project recently where a person left and didn't say anything to partners. And it was only a couple of months later that they say to someone, so what's happening with that project? And quickly scrambling to go, they have left no handover, no information about this. So this is really tricky. So having your own backup and agreements between teams is important to have there. So the other is about data management plans as well. So increasingly it's important to, you'll be putting, oftentimes, making ethics applications. And this is also important for if part of your research, and I'm not sure if you've heard of the Australian Digital Research Observatory, increasingly Australian researchers may be called on to donate their research. So if you're on social media, for example, you might have an app installed on any apps that you use, and all the information, quite, I guess, low-level information can be shared for other researchers. It's anonymous, it's voluntary. Do you want to take part in that? But where is it stored? Do you want to take part in that? Do you want members of your team to be taking part of that? So the data management plan is really important as well in terms of what data is collected, where's it stored, and information about this can be, you can get this from the library. Interdisciplinarity, it also means you might look at where should I publish? And so in terms of the authorship agreement, the conversation can also be around where will I publish my work? So as everyone's seen on the library website, where should I publish? Yep, and you can get all the journal articles. And so Emma you make a really good point about, you know, where do I want to see my work? And it can be great for early career researchers to say, I'm going to be on this team with this really important professor. How important is that for you? So for example, myself, I'm in communications and digital media. If I'm working with a really important professor in terrestrial ecology, and if, for example, then the professor says, yep, we're getting in an A-star journal, it's in terrestrial ecology, I'm going to go, nah. How does that work for me and my career and what I've been building over time? And this is something that, again, we should be strategic about. Does that work? Or is there a way, can we show that this research is split across two FOR codes? Terrestrial ecology is brilliant, but what about communicating science? Or what about communicating science in the environment? That would work for me. We're both happy. And so we can show that our work sits across an interdisciplinary field that's accepted by standards, but it also means that we can look at particular journals that will take on both of the research that would work for the team. So that can help as well.
It's something that maybe we can talk about later on, but I'm just interested in co-authorship also to explore increasingly with interdisciplinary projects, but also with industry partners and partnering with NGOs and, in my case, traditional owner corporations and conservation orgs. We're sort of navigating as we go, but the kind of ethical and increasing position of publishing with research partners outside of institutions. So, you know, I think, again, that needs to be worked into research agreements and formal research agreements with partners, but sometimes that's not clear until you've done the work, and it's about thinking slightly sideways maybe to the way that universities have framed authorship about participation and project development and who's sharing their knowledge, particularly in the case of traditional owners.
Yes.
So yeah, something that I think is emerging as
would that, and this is where ethics, if anyone's done them, you know, you're virtually giving up, you know, a child, you know, to do an ethics application and get it, you know, by the you know, it's just so dense, but it sets up a great method and a methodology as well. So if you are working with First Nations people, for example, there are very clear guidelines, as you know, about, you know, how you do this, how you manage it, and the questions will be coming back to you. Well, who's going to be responsible for communicating the findings to organisations or to our communities, and how is that going to be done, or what's the nature of the relationship and what are they contributing to it? So if you get that time to unpack it through a scaffolding through the ethics application, is that something that you have done?
Yeah, definitely. It's a longer conversation, I think, too, but one that I think is also about who owns knowledge, you know, and exploitative research.
Well, that's a bigger conversation around Indigenous knowledge systems, isn't it? And that sort of ownership. But that's where it's almost a cultural conversation to say, you know, we're working together, and this is the hat I have on in an institution. This is what is expected of me. Not my views, but this is probably, you know, what is expected. Would you be comfortable with that? Authorship agreement means that for publishing purposes. However, the tricky thing is that you might come to an agreement, but then you go, oh, this particular publisher wants to publish our work. Fantastic. And when you read the terms and conditions, you can be signing away. So, for example, I just saw one for Oxford University Press, great publisher. Oh, yes, let me sign with them. Until you read that they want to keep the work, and this is just one agreement, they want to keep the work and have the right to change it in perpetuity and publish it whatever they want. And it made me, you know, it raised eyebrows. So this again is about being strategic. Is it worth getting the very timely information out right now within their, you know, the caveat of, you know, their legalese, and other people want to come along with that. So it is very much a conversation.
But is your advice to establish authorship agreements at the
early stages or as projects initiate, or
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a wish list, if you like. So you can start with, well, where would we love to publish? Where would be, our go-to to publish? And, set out some, okay, this is what the expectations are. Do we still think this is a good idea? And then it could be, you start your proposal maybe early and canvas whether or not there's interest. So you go to Oxford University Press and they go, yeah, love it. You go, fantastic, so we can work it up. And they go, we want a bit more. Okay, I can give you, a few ideas, chapters or a few ideas. Can you send us your agreement of what we could be looking at down the track? And then you can go, yeah, not for us. Or you can push back and say, could we change this? And, you can go to the Library of Copyright, for example, in the library, it can give you some basic advice. Uni solicitors can help a little bit as well. Or you can seek advice elsewhere. Does that help? Yeah, a little bit. So I would definitely say early.
I'll probably just add that, these things are emergent, and if you are often with interdisciplinary research, or it might be the first time you've worked with this particular group of colleagues. So sometimes you do need to kind of see how things go and how, what kind of data you collect. I mean, the kind of research that I'm doing in anthropology as well, it is difficult to predict exactly how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
So sometimes, I think having the conversation is really, really important, but sometimes you don't necessarily want to put everything down if it may come back for someone to say, oh, but you said we'd write this paper with this order, and people have, maybe dropped out of the project or not sure.
And that happens quite often, but that's okay. I've got 2 projects where that's happened, and it can just be, look, you dropped, can be communicating to someone. You've gone to a different institution. We're still going to move forward with this. And what you contributed was good, but we've shifted away from what's been done, just to let you know. Or most people will not necessarily push back because it's not a binding agreement either. It's the conversation to say, this is how we'd like to move forward, and it's a fine line too. And every group, every individual is different. Some people were really put off by that, going, oh, why are we doing this now? This is shutting me down. Other people go, thank goodness for that. I know where I stand. So obviously it's going to be up to people, but there is, however, the expectation that within Deakin as an institution, that you do get an authorship agreement, that you do have a data management plan, that there is agreement that someone does take the lead on steering the data and making sure that that is stored in an appropriate way, and only those that should have access, etc., and disposal of it. That everyone's got their training for ethics. So if you're doing animal ethics, human ethics, for example, that everyone does have the appropriate compliance training, for example. Forgive me, did you have another question?
Oh no, sorry.
Okay.
I think related to that, there are 2 little things that I could add. One is that for SSN purposes, we do require the lead person to be SSN, even though you can collaborate with people across other institutions. And this is the reason why, because somebody has to manage the data, somebody is the administering organization is Deakin, and so on. And then we have to manage the situation if somebody is leaving the institution, for which reason we also say that you need to have a contract until, even though we want to encourage early career researchers, if you're in a contracted position and that finishes at a certain, you need to have the contract at least until the end of the funding period. So that is one of the things. The other thing I was thinking was that increasingly we also have not only interdisciplinary but intersector, so I have a colleague who's doing work with young people, and from her perspective of fairness and justice and all of that, she wanted them to participate in collaboratively writing, to give them credit for publications and so on. But actually the young people are not particularly interested in spending time. So this is, again, as you were saying, it's a cultural thing of how we think about how much we value, kind of authorship, and how we think about knowledge as something that is owned or commodified, or as a authorship as a prestigious sort of, all of that. So I think lots of those conversations are interesting in themselves, actually, of great interest to STS. As it happens. So, yeah.
The other aspect with collaborative research is doing risk assessment. Doesn't everyone love to hear about that now? I did one project where I just want to use Fed Square, and the risk assessment was just extraordinary. But there are, again, lots of supports in Deakin now through research to help people to navigate that. It's getting colour coded, which is terrific. But just on risk assessments as well, for where you are, if you're working offsite, if you're working with people offsite, you know, what's the risk assessment that's going to be there? There is also a requirement that we let our Associate Dean of Research know if we're doing collaborative research beyond the university, for example, interdisciplinary research. And apparently failure to adhere to a collaborative research agreement is not good. So this is when we've got formal collaboration agreements in place, and these will be written up by the university solicitors. Also think about whether or not there's commercialisation potential from what you're creating, because then not only do you have your commercial your agreement for collaboration and publication, as we're talking about, but do you have a thing that could be commercialised potentially as well? And we, you know, through commercialisation, they can help you as well. So is your idea just a good idea, or is it viable? Is it something that you want to pursue? And SSN can be great with bringing teams together for this thing as well.
And probably just on picking up on Lillian's point, we have one Discovery Indigenous project that I'm a CI on. We have agreements with the Kimberley Land Council. So we have the multi-institutional agreement, and then we also have an agreement between all of the 3 universities and the Land Council, and that did take quite a long time, and working through the contracts people at all 3 universities, and it does include Indigenous cultural and intellectual property provisions, which had to be worked out alongside everyone's institutional rules about intellectual property. So yeah, it is. Hopefully there'll be more templates for these as we move forward for agreements where there are, you know, real questions about knowledge ownership and knowledge holding.
You know, university solicitors help with that. Our contracts team help with that. But it does take a while. You know, it does take a while. Memoranda of understanding take a while. Contracts, any sort of contracts do take a while. If we are working, it's probably more appropriate for the workshop. But if you are working with councils, organisations outside Deakin, you build a relationship and then you want to formalise it. That takes time as well. Getting the contracts done takes time. You know, I've had some that will just go 4 months. And now I build that into the time and the planning. I get onto it early. I let the partners know it's going to take a while, because I had one that went on for over 2 years, and I'm like, what is going on? I know. Thanks. So, you know, please come to speak to me if you've got any issues with this. Patrick Gee has been terrific in my experience of pushing things along as well to get contracts through. So that's a time thing. If any issues do come up, please use the research integrity advisors. We do have you know, concerns when research goes wrong, and that's what integrity advisors are for, to help navigate that. Are there any questions? And happy to pick up anything in the workshop. Thanks, Emma.
Great. Yeah, so we've got kind of looking at all the things that can go wrong, but how we can prevent them. And of course, all these issues that Tui's talked about apply to all research, but I think, interdisciplinary research really highlight how important they are. So I want to kind of shift and talk a little bit more about why we should do it, despite all the challenges. So both within Deakin and more broadly, interdisciplinary research is, you know, more and more, ever more, part of the picture. So the current Deakin University Research and Innovation Guiding Plan that's only just been released specifically talks about the importance of working across different disciplines. And, you know, this themes comes through again and again, that all of the challenging global issues and national and local issues require more than just one discipline's input to actually solve them. Also, there's currently a review of the National Competitive Grants Program. I think it's now just recently closed for submissions, but they also talk about collaborative interdisciplinary teams, and the ARC, as I mentioned before, also specifically really is interested in how to support interdisciplinary research. Also, although rankings, we always have to take them with a grain of salt, but the Times Higher Education just this year has launched its first interdisciplinary rankings, and next year we'll be awarding not just interdisciplinarity but within science as it is this year, but across the sciences and social sciences as well. So once people are starting to figure out how to rank things, how to measure things, I suppose that's a level of maturity of the industry that now we're quantifying it for the good and the bad of that. So I want to move to some very specific tips for applications. What do you do if you've got a really great idea? You've developed an interdisciplinary collaboration, you've read deeply in another discipline, or you've formed relationships with colleagues across disciplines. You have a good understanding of how these two disciplines might be complementary to address this problem, and you're ready to apply for a grant. So I want to talk a little bit about the art of that, and I think of it as a balancing act between novelty and misrecognition. So misrecognition meaning you're unrecognizable, or you're recognized incorrectly. So there is a fine line between being novel and pushing boundaries, but you can go so far that you are no longer seen as a properly part of your discipline. And so it's an art to doing it, and that's why it's really good to come and be involved with the Science and Study Network, kind of pitch your ideas and just get used to talking about your project, and get advice from colleagues at all levels about whether this sounds like, for the case of history, this sounds like really innovative approaches to history, or actually this doesn't really sound like history anymore. And people will have different opinions about that, and you need to use your judgment. But another way to think about it is to show how your interdisciplinary approach adds to the question that you want to ask, but doesn't subtract, doesn't make it less compelling, less useful. So we can talk in the workshop as well about how that actually applies in practice. It might seem a little bit abstract, but hopefully it rings some bells for you. So FOR codes that I discussed previously and are the official definition of what interdisciplinary research is from the perspective of the ARC, that you are using more than one two-digit code. So your research moves across two distinct disciplinary areas. So when you put in a grant for the ARC, you nominate different FOR codes that are relevant to your research, and you give them a different weighting that add up to 100%. And it's a really important step to do, because it is showing what is the disciplinary or interdisciplinary identity of this particular piece of work, and where your reviewers might come from. So the FOR codes are used to indicate who might be reviewing your grant and giving back comments on it. And you need to use them with care. So you want to use FOR codes that do really show the different disciplines, but sometimes you might not use an FOR code if reviewers from that code might not recognise what you're doing. So
an example. So oftentimes I'll get my grant cover sheet and I'll say, this is a perfect FOR code. This really speaks to this particular area, because digital technologies, digital media, communications can go across so much, but more and more we need being called to really put a stake in a particular area. And so I was thinking, well, I do sociology of science and technology, don't I? That's a great FOR coding that I can put in there. The question was would peers from the field of sociology recognise you as a digital sociologist? Have you published in the Q1, Q2 sociology journals in your field? I go, no, but my work is there. Doesn't matter. Q1, Q2 in my field are these particular journals. That's where I've planted my stake over the last 6 years. And when we get to these really competitive grants, you need to think, where have you carved out a space for yourself? And can you step into another FOR code so easily?
Yeah, so that's really, really good to put a meat on the idea with an example. Yeah, so in your case, if you're talking about the sociology of media within the application, that makes you look like, wow, you're a media communication studies person, but you have so much of this sociology of media. Isn't that fantastic? So that's making it work for you. But if you did use an FOR code in sociology and then the reviewers are like, actually, she hasn't published in any of those journals, so how can she call herself a sociologist? That would then be working against you.
And we had a chat about how this can be a semantic point. So a chemist, for example, and someone was saying, but you're doing, this journal that's about, new law around chemistry, for example. How does that position you as a chemist? Well, how does it not, can I not skive off some of that information and be contributing to the field of chemistry in some particular way? And you do get into, some of the debates about, what it is. However, we have to look at what expectations are around ARC and conventions.
That's right, yeah. And there might be journals that are like our sociology journals, and the people who are within the media discipline might say, oh yeah, that's she's published in a sociology journal. That's great. The sociology reviewers might go, oh, that journal isn't the best journal, so that that's not good enough. So what's good enough within one discipline, particularly what can make you seem like, yes, you are publishing in sociology, but if you're then using the FOR code and getting a reviewer from that second discipline, there's real risks in doing that.
From a practical point of view, the ARC publishes a database of everything they've funded for the last decade or more. You can search that by field of research code.
Yes, you can.
If you're not recognising the names that are coming up over the first couple of screens, then maybe that indicates they won't recognise your name either.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if you're recognising them and going, I don't want that person reading my grant, right? At least you're in the space, right? You know what the conversations are.
Has everyone seen on the ARC website that you can get the data of what's been funded over time, and you can get lovely little graphs and pinpoint it?
We actually did a little project looking at the abstracts of funded research, discovery and linkage, to examine also. One of the questions we asked was, how do people understand contribution? Like, how do they claim something as a contribution? We compared education and if I remember, computer science or something like that, and thought of what do they think of as, and what do they think, how do they think about research as cumulative or as a gap, or as a wall that you build upon, etc. So yeah, you can lots of really interesting data on the ARC website.
Strategically, that's also really useful, not just to reverse engineer where you have published and will be recognised, but also where you might strategically publish thinking about long-term interdisciplinary grants so that you are recognised in a field, just actually journal selection for projects too.
Also for FOR codes. So for example, my field, media and communications, zip, nada, no ARCs, but cultural studies, they've got a couple. So it's, how do you then say, 2002, that's really what, so building that a little bit, as you say, strategically to hopefully be able to position your work well. And that comes to what you're saying, Radhika, about, how you write the abstract, does it speak to that community of people?
So I've just got like a couple more things in this first part, and then we can dig down. I've had a lot of experience doing interdisciplinary research, but also supporting researchers putting in grants and getting grants for interdisciplinary research. So we can talk about, what happens when you get reviewers from multiple disciplines and how do you,
Just one last question. So you've got ABDC versus Q1, Q2, Q3, and often matching them isn't as straightforward, right? It's like fitting the wrong size piece into the wrong hole. So that becomes challenging as to what constitutes a quality publication. Especially in multidisciplinary teams.
Well, the ABC, you're talking about the ERA.
Yeah.
The business teams council, they've maintained that beyond ERA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they maintain an up-to-date listing that is like the ERA listing.
The ARC.
No, the business teams.
Oh, the
council.
business teams.
Australian
council,
Business
got
Teams
you.
Council.
Yeah,
listed
sure.
publications.
Yeah, so there are like political science. So there's some disciplines that maintain a list, but I think most do no longer maintain that.
Or I think that, our faculty is looking at the series list, CERES for all book publishers. And
Yep,
so
book
they'll look
publishers,
at all
there's a
book
list as
publishers
well.
and say where they're ranked, but Q1 and Q2 on the SJR website. So if you're looking for a particular journal, you just put the name of the journal and it will bring up and give you the H index of that journal.
Yeah, so if there is a discipline-specific listing that's maintained, absolutely, that's your Bible, I suppose. But again, if you're moving across disciplines, you want to check the SJR.
Also
portal.
educate, I suppose, educate the reviewer in the sense that, like if you just make sure that both, if it's an interdisciplinary panel that's looking at your paper, at your proposal, then make sure that you just add a little note to say a Q1, or list, whatever, listing A, ranked A in this list or whatever, so that you just have a little way to clarify.
Yeah,
Because,
and particularly if it's a Q2 journal in the quartiles, but is a journal in your disciplinary. And that definitely in my discipline, when we had the ERA list, which is now 15 years ago, the main point of it was, one of the points of it was to really elevate Australian journals, because we thought, well, Australian journals wouldn't have the citations and might not have the ranking of internationally, but it's incredibly important in anthropology, for example, that Australian journals are valued, and I suppose history is another one. So if your disciplinary ranking had something as A, but it was a Q2, that would be really important to highlight. Okay, so general advice. So how do you approach interdisciplinary projects? How do you develop these collaborations? And it's really important, as we've talked about, it takes time. It's not something that is good to rush. And to spend time together, socialise, share publications and discuss them. If you've got a little mini reading group, can be fantastic. Present to each other's colleagues. So if you have colleagues across the university, offer to say, well, if there's a seminar that I can give over at your faculty or your school, and just offer, and maybe they'll say, yes, that would be fantastic. So really trying to kind of socialise literally, hang out together if you can. I know that can be really difficult if you've got children at home and all of that, and that that can mean maybe it makes it more difficult to actually build up those collaborations. But whatever you can do to really get into each other's heads and understand each other's languages, starting small, a conversation article can be a really good way to start. It's kind of getting you with your interdisciplinary collaborators, right, on the internet together, and just saying something together which is based at a public audience, but really carving out your kind of niche. As I mentioned, going to conferences in the field that you want to start to understand. Presenting is brilliant if you can do that, and apply for seed funding from the SSN or elsewhere. And being realistic, so this very much feeds back into the research integrity piece. But even just getting really into the methods, will you work off the same data set if you do a project, or you have separate data sets? Will you analyze this data together, or maybe you'll have the same data but analyze it separately through your different disciplinary analytical lenses? We've talked about publications, and we've talked about and with grant applications, maybe you'll make it clear, yep, I want to apply for a ECR grant as a sole CI, because that's what's normal in my discipline. But we'll also collaboratively try to get at this other scheme. And there are a lot of good and some bad resources out there on interdisciplinary research, but I've just got one there that I find really useful. So that's really all we want to talk about in the second part, about the specific SSN funding opportunity that we have offered every year. We haven't yet finalised that we will be offering it this year, but I think it's highly likely we will. And this would be in the second half a really good opportunity to tell us about your research. But given that we're at 11, we might just stop there and do a quick plug for our public audience event coming up on Tuesday, the 8th of July. There may be people, so there's actually a national conference or a regional conference that Deakin is hosting called OzSTS, which I don't have a slide for, but that's from the 9th to the 11th of July, which is a conference in science and technology studies, which is the interdisciplinary study of science and technology from a humanities and social science perspective, and a kind of fellow traveller with the Science and Society Network. So just to mention, there's a large conference that's going to be from the 9th to the 11th of July. That's Karina Traits, who's our SSN coordinator, is also chief organiser of that conference. But immediately before that conference, on Tuesday, the 8th of July, we're doing a really brilliant public event. Tiffany is going to be one of the speakers. Vicky, myself, and Karina will also be there speaking. So do come along to that, and we might leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Without saying, yeah, great. Perfect. Oh yeah, I should have. Oh yeah, we didn't. We did a great recording. Thanks. There were a few people who really appreciated being able to.